All right, Matt Park is the voice of the Orange, longtime voice of the Orange. Does a great job, and we appreciate a few minutes with Syracuse tonight against 14th, the 11th seed against the 14th seed at the Barclays. That ACC tournament gets ready to roll. Matt, Roger Weiland, Chris Honorato in Albany. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good, Matt. Appreciate a few minutes. And I guess it goes without saying tonight that this is a must win for the Orange if they have any hopes of getting into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, no question. To me, they're at least back in consideration after beating Clemson. I think after the Boston College loss, it looked pretty bleak. And, to lose tonight, you've really got no claim to have a tournament spot. If you win tonight, lose tomorrow, I think you're right on the borderline and wouldn't sleep very easy. But if you win this one and beat North Carolina, I think it'd be pretty tough to keep Syracuse out.
Well, I hear a lot of people saying, well, they should beat Wake, and Wake's not really very good, but they did split during the regular season.
Right, they kicked the game away down there at Wake, and Wake really got hot in the second half, shooting the ball in both games. To me, is that something that continues in a neutral site here when Wake doesn't have a ton to play for at the end of the year? I would not, if I were a Demon Deacon fan, I would not be super optimistic about that. The Syracuse defense, for the most part, has been strong. They ought to be in pretty good shape, but Wake with a big man has an opportunity to exploit Syracuse on the inside, and certainly they need to be taken seriously. Coach Boeheim thinks Wake's a team that really is much better than its record would suggest. They've been in a lot of close games and have come up short. You talk about the big guy. How you've seen him play. We're talking about Darrell Moore, average 11 points a game. He's 7'1", so pretty much a matchup nightmare, right, for any team on the inside. No doubt, and I'm glad you pointed out that way because he's not just a nightmare for Pascal Chukwu or Syracuse. He's a nightmare for anybody. I mean, he's the most mass in the league. Florida State's got a couple of really big dudes. Chris Kamaji's 7'4". He's just incredibly big. But Darrell Moore is broad in the shoulders and takes up a lot of space. He's 280 pounds. He had 16 rebounds in the game against Syracuse at the Carrier Dome. So he's really somebody to contend with, and I think potentially gets at the weakness of what Syracuse could be, which would be interior defense. But for the most part, the Syracuse defense has been strong this year. I think if you keep Moore in check or if he gets tired or foul trouble, those are some of the ways that you can kind of counteract him.
Matt Park with us, the voice of the Orange, play-by-play, of course, for the Syracuse basketball and football teams. And Matt, I said at the beginning of the show, I'll take the blame if Syracuse somehow loses tonight because I have tickets to go to tomorrow night's session, 7 and 9 o'clock, in anticipation of seeing Syracuse. So if it doesn't happen, I'll take the blame. But from your perspective, I know this isn't Manhattan and Madison Square Garden anymore. It's Brooklyn and the Barclays. But with the large alumni base of Syracuse people in New York City, does it still have something of a home court feel for the Orange?
Well, it's hard to say. I would say not yet. I will point out as a caveat, when they played South Carolina in the regular season here a couple times ago, I wasn't at that game. We had a football conflict. And then last year, in the ACC tournament against Miami, it was an early game. It was a loss, and you hardly even got settled in, and so I didn't necessarily feel that. I do think as the week would progress, absolutely. I think the fact this is a night game gives you a chance. When Syracuse plays in New York, it's a big deal. Barclays is a beautiful building, and it's tremendous that it's here. It's not the Garden, and so I think that has a little bit of, takes a little bit out of it. But I would think absolutely, you'll feel the fan base here, certainly relative to Wake Forest.
Matt, who's the X factor for this team? I mean, the big three are right, Battle and Howard and Brissett. Is there maybe an X factor that if this person plays well in addition to the big three, that this team could be could really do some damage here?
Yeah, I mean, within that group, I would say O'Shea Brissett because he's the guy who probably, he's a freshman. He has the biggest sort of swings in his performance. Frank Howard's been relatively consistent. He's turned it over too much a few times, but he's been strong. And Tyus Battle, is clearly the best player on the team and one of the best in the league and is there, pretty much every game. O'Shea Brissett could hit 4 3-pointers or none. He could have 6 rebounds or 14. So that's a swing guy for me. Now, the other, factors, there's only, 2.5 other guys that play. Do they give you anything, or do they shrink in the moment? And again, if you're just talking about getting through Wake, it's not like Wake's got any, daunting bench presence or anything like that. I think it's just a matter of, if both teams play well, Syracuse beats Wake, 4 times out of 5. It's a matter of, how close do you come to your best performance, and so that has to do, I think, with the seasoning of your team. And I think in that case, Syracuse is in pretty good shape. Wake doesn't have a lot to play for here. I mean, if they come out and do the spoiler role, maybe they've got veteran players that want to extend their careers in that way. But obviously they're not going to make the NCAA tournament. And I think it's a team that if you can get up on them, then you might see them check out a bit.
And the Orange in general played really good defense all year, right? Yielding, was it about 64 points per game?
Yes. I mean, they've regularly held teams to, 20 points below their scoring average and things like that. A lot of that is, dependent on pace too. They play a slower pace than most teams, but I think defense is something that's consistently good. My only concern would be how do they continue to play good defense over the course of 2, 3, 4 days. But right now, it's about getting to the next day, and then if you can win tomorrow night against North Carolina, if you're fortunate enough to get through Wake Forest, then then I think you cross that bridge when you come to it. If you've beaten 2 teams here in Brooklyn, then I think your NCAA tournament fate is pretty well sealed up, and you're in good shape, and those games then become a little more gravy as opposed to the necessity.
Matt, at the end of the day, on Selection Sunday, how many ACC teams do you think hear their names called?
I don't know. I mean, I think if you just kind of grab the standings here in front of me, but certainly you've got 4 locks, and then really the next 3 there. I mean, the top 7 in the standings, I think all the way down to Virginia Tech, have got to be in pretty good shape. Louisville, Florida State, Notre Dame, all in pretty good shape. I don't know about Notre Dame, but the other 2 are in pretty good shape. And, if it comes down to Notre Dame versus Syracuse, if their credentials are pretty much identical, Notre Dame has a head-to-head win against Syracuse and has, kind of an asterisk next to its losses, and some of them with Bonzie Colson out. So that's one where, again, I think Syracuse has to take advantage of the opportunity to improve its resume with the couple of days it has here.
It's funny. I put, just in kind of our show prep here, I said I just tried to couple some of Syracuse's best wins, worst losses, and I put in the worst loss category the Notre Dame game only because there was no Bonzie Colson, but also no Matt Farrell. I mean, you'll remember that game was played in reverse, in the mud. It was incredibly low scoring, and I was shocked that the Cuse didn't find a way to get that one.
Well, it was right there and literally right in their hands and slipped out of their hands. They've got the ball with a chance to go in for the winning basket in the final seconds, and the best player on the team caught up the ball, and it's pretty much an uncontested layup at the other end. I mean, it's hard to come up with worse ways to lose than that. So forget about the personnel on the other team. You figure they've got in the bag, or certainly right there to win, and it didn't work out. And this team didn't lose to any totally subpar opponents as last year's team did, but it does have a couple, 2, 3, 4 of these types of games that they'd love to have back, particularly in the way they were finished.
Yeah, and the Boston College game obviously would be in that category.
I think they get in. I think, yeah.
Well, they got to win tonight, and then if they do they have to beat North Carolina, or do they need to play well again against North Carolina?
I mean, the way I look at it is, they did play well against North Carolina the first time. To me, and you look at the committee, they don't really play, put a lot of, at least in black and white, the emphasis on margin of victory and that type of thing. So the whole, do they play well or not? And, how closely are they really drilling in on that if it's a 6-point loss? But the way I view it is, if you lose tonight, then, you're headed to the NIT. If you win 2, you're more than likely in the NCAA tournament. If you go 1-1, I think you have a claim to be in the NCAA tournament. I just wouldn't rest terribly easy with that, because now you're at the hands of the committee and at the fate of some of the other results.
No doubt. Hey, Matt, have a great call tonight. We appreciate a few minutes here in Albany. You know how many Syracuse alums we have and how much interest level there is in SU. So we appreciate you coming on.
You bet. Thanks, Roger and Chris.
Thank you, Matt.